Hi there, and welcome to a new episode of Literature Snacks, the set of videos where I make an analysis of a literary masterpiece in roughly 15-20 minutes. Today, we're talking about William Blake and his Songs of Innocence and Songs of Experience. Are you ready? Let's go! William Blake was born in 1757 and his father was a hosier. He made stockings. Little William spoke of having visions from his early childhood, as he said that he had seen God put his head from the window when he was 4, and around the age of 9 he claimed that he had seen a tree filled with angels. Blake will have vision all throughout his life, and this has unmistakably influenced his works. Anyway, his father soon recognized that he was different from the other, and they didn't send him to school. On the other hand, his mother taught him to read and to write, and when at the age of 10 Blake expressed the wish to become a painter, they sent him to a drawing school. After that, he became an apprentice to an engraver, as art school was too expensive for them. In this period, he sketched the tombs at Westminster Abbey, and he was exposed to a great variety of Gothic style that influenced him a lot. Blake was not only a poet, in fact, he was a painter as well, and for a living he was an engraver and an illustrator for books and magazines. His first printed work was published in 1783. It was called Poetical Sketches, and it is a collection of verses, mostly imitating classical models, protesting against war, tyranny, and the way that King George III was treating the American colonies. His most popular collection, Songs of Innocence, that we are talking about in this video, was published in 1789, followed in 1794 by Songs of Experience. Both the Songs of Innocence and Songs of Experience were printed with a technique he called Illuminated Printing. The text illustrations were printed from copper plates, and then each picture was finished by hand in watercolor. According to Blake, this technique was revealed to him in a dream by his brother, Robert. Robert was one of the younger brothers that he had started to train in drawing and engraving, but he was killed by consumption. About Blake's visions, he claimed that when Robert died in 1787, he saw his spirit leaving his body and heading to the sky, clapping his hands for joy. In complete contrast with the neoclassical convention of the time, Blake always privileged imagination over reason. He always asserted that the ideal form should be generated not by observing nature, but by indulging in imagination and inner vision. Blake was clearly tending to a movement that we will later call Romanticism. Despite his mysticism and his vision, which according to him will accompany him all throughout his life, it is due to say that Blake was more of a religion seeker rather than a joiner. He loved the world of the spirits, but he always took distances from the institutionalized one, especially when it was allied with the government. Blake was both a poet and an engraver, as I said before, and he was commissioned a lot of illustrations for books and poems, but his own watercolors, which were exhibited in the Royal Academy, obtained mixed results. Some praised them, but some called them hideous and accused Blake of being insane. So he was connected to a very important circle of intellectuals, counting Mary Wollstonecraft in it, Mary Shelley's mother. Blake spent his last year in great poverty, until in 1818 he met a young artist called John Linnell, who helped him financially and commissioned to him to design illustrations for Dante's Divina Commedia, which, by the way, he could read, as he had taught himself Italian, especially for reading Italian literature. He died in 1827 at the age of 70 without completing the illustrations. His books, Songs of Innocence and Songs of Experience, circulated among intellectuals like Coleridge, Wordsworth, Montgomery and Charles Lamb, with some considering him a genius like Coleridge and some considering him insane like Wordsworth. Despite being so much controversial, we owe to Blake the ability to see something that no one was able to see before, and the responsibility of having revolutionized the importance of imagination in poetry. The two collections are a juxtaposition of the pastoral world of childhood against the world of corruption and repression of adulthood. Songs of Innocence dramatize the naive hopes and fears that dominate children's world. Some poems are written from the children's perspective, and some are about children but from the adult perspective. They are not at all a celebration of innocence and purity, as sometimes Blake exposes the ability of Christianity of promoting injustice and cruelty. Songs of Experience laments the way in which the harshness of life of adults destroy the innocence with which every human being is provided as a child. Sexual morality is what ruins the innocence of love through jealousy, shame and secrecy. Pay attention, lust has no fault. Faith is also ruined by the experience, as in adult life the awareness of the bond between church and government arises. All in all, what experience does to innocence is to add a layer that not only darkens its earthly vision, but it also compensates for some of its blindness. The style itself of this poem is simple and direct, although the language and the rhythm are scrupulously selected. Most of the poems are in narrative style, but some, as in The Sick Rose or The Divine Image, make their point by using strong symbolism and abstract concept. The rhetorical devices that Blake leans towards are personification and reworking of biblical symbolism. In deep contrast with the previous literary tendencies which praise classical standard and rigid criteria, Blake employs the meters of ballads as well as nursery rhymes and hymns, manipulating them to comply to his unorthodox conceptions. This attitude is absolutely compatible with Blake's tendency of reconsidering and reframing the assumption of human thoughts and social behavior. We can definitely say that Blake was able to think outside the box. As I said, Songs of Innocence and Songs of Experience are two parallel works, and the two poems that we most like to pull together to show the parallelism are The Lamb from Songs of Innocence and The Tyger from Songs of Experience. The lamb is a clear reworking of the biblical symbolism, as Blake sees the figure of the lamb as the expression of God's will and the beauty of God's creation. The speaker is a child in this case. We can track three major themes in this poem: God and creation, nature, and childhood and innocence. God and creation. The child is amazed by the lamb as he sees it as an unmistakable expression of God. In his humble and gentle figure, he sees the beauty of God's work. The child then extends this concept to the fact that he is also created by God, as well as all the world. A further connection can be made if we refer to the Bible in John 1:29, where Jesus is given the title Lamb of God. But as Jesus is God, therefore the Lamb is God. This is Blake's conception that God's creation cannot be separated by their creator. There's a deep trust of faith in God's creation and God's work that suggests that both the child and the lamb are safe in God's hands. The whole poem is permeated by a sense of bliss and comfort that it represents innocence at its pure essence. Nature. The poem portrays an idyllic pastoral scene that in Latin would be called la locus amenus. and the scene placed in a natural environment with the complete absence of urban presence that is clearly portrayed, for example, in the poem entitled London, becomes a powerful source of happiness and freedom. The lamb is also a part of nature, but being there among streams and meadows allows him to have a coat that is described as clothing of delight. Nature has a positive effect on the lamb because it allows him to be himself without any restrictions. But the lamb has also a positive effect on nature, as it calls make valleys rejoice in lines 7 and 8. The lamb is then in symbiosis with nature, and this balance instills with joy the child, suggesting to the reader that the real joy, happiness and freedom can be achieved only by nurturing the relationship with nature and that relationship that the restrictive city is taking away. Don't forget that the Industrial Revolution had broken the famous balance between humans and nature so bad that it prompted a lot of poets to celebrate this liaison to protect it. The poem then is implicitly prompting the reader to value and nurture their relationship with nature. Childhood and innocence. Blake had always been convinced that children are born with everything they need to live with joy and freedom. The whole joyful appreciation of the lamb in this poem is strictly tied to the child's perspective. Adults should not reject their childhood feelings as growing old, and should not consider that perspective a naive one, but a kind of enlightenment. Would an adult, with all his troubles and responsibility, be able to appreciate the lamb with his innocence, vulnerability and joy as the child speaker does? Blake subverts the idea of childhood by making it not a state of ignorance, but a state of innate understanding. The child is fully able to recognize the lamb as a God's creation and to fully understand that he himself is also a God creation, and also Jesus, who was God himself, was brought into this world as a child. This makes childhood in some way something sacred. Line 18, stating, "We are called by his name," reinforces the link between the lamb, the child, and God. They are unified because they are all a part of God. Blake then is more concerned for the readers to grow out of their state of enlightenment they are born with, and he is encouraging us to embrace our childhood feelings, as it is the only way to live a life of joy, happiness and freedom. The Tyger is a poem contained in Songs of Experience, and we tended to consider it the opposite of the lamb in Songs of Innocence. The poem continuously insists on questioning how is it possible that the same God who created the innocent and vulnerable lamb has also created the fearsome tiger. The poem argues one of the most difficult questions in terms of religion. Why does God allow evil to exist? At the same time, the feeling of marvel toward the tiger and its power, and by extension of it toward God's power, is always present. We can track two themes in this poem: the existence of evil and creativity. The existence of evil. Along with his sister poem, The Lamb, this poem has the intent to praise God's creation, but the tiger is a completely different animal. The tiger inspires fear, danger, terror so much that it is almost impossible to believe that it was created by the same God who created the lamb. Why would God, who created the innocent and vulnerable lamb, create the tiger, a creature who would eat the lamb for sure, and the lamb could do nothing but perish in his jaws? Blake is using the tiger as a symbol to inquire why is evil existing and why does God allow it. Has God created evil, same as he created the tiger? Blake's attempt to reconcile the idea of a loving God with the frightening nature of tiger only leads to a series of unanswerable questions. The tiger is continuously connected to fire, which leads us to two thoughts. 1. Fire is visually impressive, but it's dangerous to get close to. 2. fire has always been connected with hell. Despite the struggle of the poet to understand the reasons of the existing of the tiger, the poem does not offer us a solution. It suggested that God was creating a symmetry, and without fear and danger, there could not be love and joy. It also suggests that it's okay to not understand, because divinity goes beyond the humanity, so it's also normal that God operates in a way that we cannot fully understand. This time, the poem leaves us with complex questions that have no easy answer. Creativity is indeed very praised in this poem, especially because everything about the creation of the tiger suggests effort, skill and artistry, suggesting that any work of art can't be really complete if it doesn't incorporate aspects of danger and intimidation. It's also worthy to notice how the creation of the tiger is constantly linked with fire, as fire embodies creativity. To craft something from fire, it's necessary to be brave, skilled and strong. It takes bravery, the ability to dare to create anything from the fire of imagination. We can see in this the personality of Blake, who was always considered more of a madman rather than an artist. I personally think we don't give and have given to Blake the glory he would really deserve. It certainly wasn't given to him when he was alive, but still now we tended to link the greater power of imagination more to Coleridge than to Blake. And though the creation of Rime of the Ancient Mariner is an unmistakably magnificence of the power of imagination, Blake has demonstrated that he was also a man of great imagination. As a fan of fantasy and fiction and books and video games, I've always seen in Blake's art the spark that led our society to indulge in imaginary worlds with magic and powerful forces beyond the comprehension of the characters, whether it was a book, a film, or even a computer game. There is also a deep humanity and knowledge of humanity in the theme of the sacredness of childhood, considering that Blake lived in a world where children were considered way different than nowadays. And also in the fact that experience of life changes and destroys our inner child by reinforcing a wall around our feelings and our ability to trust people or to make friends. Blake wrote in the late 18th century, but still, his texts are worthy to be read today in the 21st century, as he had understood some deep difficulties of the human soul that we struggle with it still nowadays. So thank you very much for watching this video. If you like it, please give us a thumb up. If you want to see more literature videos and more history videos, please subscribe to the channel. Remember, we are a language school. We are right next to Milan and we teach English, French, Spanish and Italian to foreigners. We deliver classes online as well as in presence. We teach teenagers as well as adults. Remember, this is our Facebook page. This is our Instagram page. This is our email address. You can write to us and ask any questions that you want about English courses or about literature. Thank you very much and I hope to see you soon with another History Sparkle. Bye bye!